Central and paramount importance. But I will only speak of one aspect of the altar today, although there are several. The altar is the place of sacrifice, for indeed we offer sacrifice week after week every time we celebrate the liturgy. But the altar is also a table, and we do not call it, altar is an English word. In Greek, we simply call the holy table, the Agia Trapeza, not the holy bank. To call the bank the trapezi comes from the fact that the bankers would sit at a table and change the money. The Agia Trapeza is the place of the meal. And this is what we should think of as we gather in the house of the Lord. That in the ancient church, the first churches, the first gatherings of those who were called, the ecclesia, those who were called out from among the nations to be called by the name of the Lord. Those first gatherings were around the table. They were in the dining rooms, as we see in the mystical Dipno, in the mystical supper, when the Lord and his apostles gather for the Last Supper. And we must not forget this basic reality. We gather together to share a meal, a special meal, a unique meal. But nonetheless, we gather for a meal. And if we forget this reality as we come and sit in the church and hear the hymns and nod off as the one young man did during the sermon, I'm sure he was tired, I'm not blaming him, but we must remember we gather first and foremost to eat together, to share in this unity that comes from breaking bread with one accord in the same place together. So, amidst all the other realities that we recognize when we gather in the church, facing towards the Agia Trapeza, the holy table, let us not forget that it is a table, not of the bankers, but for meals, for us to gather together and eat. What we will speak about next week is more the reality of the altar as a place of sacrifice. But in the midst, joining the two, the altar as table for a meal and the altar as the altar of sacrifice, there is the reality of the altar as the tombstone of the saints. And it is this that we should speak of, especially as today we celebrate the great feast of Saint Demetrius. For any of you who have been to Thessaloniki have surely visited the great church of Demetrius, which was built on the place where he was martyred, on the place where he was buried. And although they did not find his body, his relic, for many years, they knew it was there because of the heavenly scent of the myrrh that flowed from his relics. So they built the church there, on the place of his witness of Christ's power and love and life, on the place of his death, not of his defeat, but of his victory, of his earning of the crown of martyrdom. And this is why we come to specific places to worship God. From ancient times, this has been the custom. Before there were any martyrs, the church gathered in the dining room of the wealthiest member of the community. But once there were martyrs, once there were relics, once those who had put their trust and their faith and their very lives on the line because of Christ, had given up their life and passed into the heavenly kingdom with a song on their lips and a smile on their face and a blessing in their hearts, even for those who cursed them and killed them. Once that happened, the churches were built on the places of those miracles. When I was a younger man and still in college, I was blessed to take a trip to Spain. And you'll think, well, Spain isn't an Orthodox country. Alήθεια, τώρα δεν είναι. But at the time, in the 4th century, Spain was the heartland of the Orthodox faith. And the Orthodox faith returned to the east with the Emperor Theodosius in the 370s, who had been born in Spain. And near Barcelona, in the ancient Roman city of Tarragona, there was the arena. And we were going on the trip to see the old Roman ruins. And we visited and we saw the Roman arena, where the gladiators had fought and where the Christians had been martyred. But there was a strange thing, because the arena was in ruins. The seats in a few places had been restored so you could walk in and see, but everything else was falling apart. And yet, in the middle of the arena, built halfway into the wall, you've all seen an arena, you know what it's like. Built halfway into the wall, facing a completely different direction, was a small building in the shape of a cross, oriented towards nothing you could think, unless you pulled out a compass and looked to see which way was east, and you saw that the church, this cruciform building, faced to the east. Never mind the rest of the architecture. Never mind this arena falling into ruins. The church was built facing towards the rising of the sun. And the iero, the altar table, was placed exactly where the great martyr of that city during the great persecution had shed his life's blood for the love of the Lord, for the witness of the glory of God. And the Christians of that place, when Christianity was restored, when the persecutions ended, they went into the arena and they tore it down and they built a church with the altar on the very place where the pagans had thought they had won victory. They built an altar to God. They built a church around that altar. And in that place, for centuries after, they gathered to eat the meal of the Lord, to receive the body and blood of Christ, to join together in memory of the saint and the experience of the joy for which the saint gave his life. In that place, sanctified by the blood of the martyr and the prayers of the faithful, they encountered God and were transformed. And this is why the altar always has the relics of saints within it. So that even here, where there have been few martyrdoms, we are still founded on the witness of the saints. We are still established as a church and as a family on the dedication and the devotion of those who gave their lives because Christ loved them and they would not renounce him. So as we gather, as we look to the Agia Trapeza, as we look to the Holy Table every Sunday, let us remember these two things, and the third we will talk about next week, about the place of sacrifice. Let us remember that we are gathered to eat a communal meal together, to be joined in this eating of what Christ gives to us, and that the place that we are joined together is founded on the witness of the saints, on the sacrifice and the love and the faith of the martyrs and the apostles, who by their death assure us that Christ brings life. May we not forget. May we be filled with joy as we remember that this is why we come here.